This was probably 10 years ago. Put this map in a separate window if you want, so you can kind of get an idea of where we were at during different points in the story. I wish I could tell this story properly. This was the one night in my life I was truly wondering whether I would die or not. For the backstory, our location is basically in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, and 30 minutes from the nearest town big enough for a Walmart, and an hour away from any town big enough to have a normal, albeit small mall. I hope that gives you an idea of how middle of nowhere we were. I had this friend, Brandon, who was my main shooting friend. It seemed like we'd always launch off about 1K rounds of 22 LR at gravel pits etc. every couple weeks. We trusted each other like I've never experienced since with anyone as far as firearms and general camaraderie. He had a history of being kind of a troublemaker but was fine around me, partially at least because we didn't go see his other friends while I was with. They were kind of a bunch of douchebags and I didn't want anything to do with them for the most part. He has since abandoned them and realizes that they were nothing but bad influence. On to the real story. So one afternoon when we hung out, Brandon mentioned this abandoned farm site that had a lot of rabbits to hunt and a couple old buildings. So of course, we decided we'd go a little later and hunt and see what we could find. It was supposedly full of rabbits every time he'd been there. The catch today was that there was a new guy in our normally two-man group, a cousin that Brandon wasn't very fond of. Brandon thought he was kind of an idiot. My opinion of him would be equally low by the end of the day. He really was an idiot. His name was Travis. I tried to give him the benefit of a doubt, but this kid really was a dumb neckbeard and it didn't take long for me to realize it. Anyway, later in the afternoon, we took off for the abandoned farm site. We parked the truck at the end of the driveway to keep the element of surprise and snuck up the driveway as quietly as possible. It was probably a little under 200 yards to the actual abandoned farm site. About half of the length of the driveway was corn taller than us, the other half was the thin driveway surrounded by trees on both sides. On one side of the driveway was the main grove, the other was a 10-foot thick wall of trees with tall corn on the other side. It was late afternoon, not too far from sunset, so we had a spotlight with in case we stayed past dark. After the end of the day I'd wish we'd left it home. This is where it all really begins. We walked up the thin driveway surrounded by trees on both sides and eventually broke off and checked out the woods together. There were a lot of details that we noticed as the day went that were not quite right about the place, but we didn't really put it all together until it turned into the crazy night trapped up on that farm site. We went through the large section of woods first. There were paths already made and plants that looked like they'd just been broken off because they were still bleeding water from where it had snapped. We figured it was deer or something we'd scared up. As we went to the barn, we noticed claw marks all over the ladder to get upstairs and pretty much zero cobwebs or signs of life other than those claw marks on the ladder rungs. Actually, there were no rabbits, or any life whatsoever on the place it seemed like, no birds, squirrels or anything, not even flies or spiders. We did think that was a little on the weird side for an abandoned farm. There's not generally a lot going on at abandoned places, but this was on a different level. As time passed, it started to get dark. We had been shooting on and off at different pieces of junk laying around for most of the time we had been there, maybe 2 hours. We had two Ruger 10/22s between the three of us and my 20 gauge 870 pump shotgun. Travis didn't have his own gun, so he used whatever we gave him at the time, usually a 22. As night set in, we grabbed the spotlight and kept exploring around the edges of the woods and behind the buildings. The spotlight was dead in about 5 minutes even though we didn't use it much. The battery must have been crap. We were about to call it a night when we heard something rustling in the woods past some shrubby trees. We kept hearing the noise, so we shot into the area and it quit for a minute. Then it came back again somewhere else but in the same general direction. Because we were so curious about this noise, we stayed past dark because we figured it was kind of a fun excuse to keep going. By now it was very dark, but it was a full moon so we could still see fairly well, but could see absolutely nothing in the woods, inside the buildings, or anywhere inside the shadows. And we kept hearing the thing running and moving through the woods with more and more frequency as time went on. It would go away for a few minutes, then we'd hear it on the other side of the clearing behind us. It was at this point we started to get freaked out because we kept hearing it change places every few minutes and it seemed to be stalking us. Eventually we saw it jump out of the woods a foot or two and dart back in. We couldn't tell what it was, but it glared a silverish and pale color in the moonlight. It was the size of a medium-large dog but quick as a cat. Now we knew this wasn't just hearing things, and of course, freaked us out even more. This went on for a long time with us just standing there trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. We were all scared shitless for hours shooting into the shadows occasionally trying to hit it. And of course we didn't want to go down the thin driveway with trees on both sides of it and almost no light. We couldn't even get a hint of light from the spotlight by this time either. We were prepared to stay there all night keeping guard if we had to. And keep in mind, at the time, cell phones were almost unheard of for most people, so we didn't have any communications out of there, because we would definitely have used it by the end. An hour or two into the dark night, we started hearing this thing from two places at once, or from both sides too fast for it to be only one thing crunching around out there. We stood there and kind of backed off from the noises we were hearing because it's natural instinct to kind of back away. But we soon realized it was trying to push us into a thinner clearing and we were almost sure they meant to do that. I'm pretty sure they wanted to get us somewhere where they could attack us from all sides quickly. From that point forward we just stayed in the center of the largest clearing no matter what we heard. At least there was about 10 to 15 yards between us and the woods in all directions. We'd have time to shoot at anything that came for us from that distance. Eventually, around midnight 1 in the morning, we decided we'd make a run for it down the driveway. We were low on ammo, and starting to get more worried as time passed. We decided that the three of us would go back to back in a triangle formation covering all sides on our escape. We were 100% convinced that if we got close to the woods, they would come after us though, so we were faced with a tough decision with the thin driveway being our only escape. Whatever these things were, they seemed damn fast and very unfriendly and unafraid of gunfire. We'd finally made the decision to abandon the spotlight, each take a gun and make our escape. Me and Travis would have the 22s, and Brandon would carry my 20 gauge. Unfortunately Travis wouldn't abandon the dead spotlight, so he took it with him for some reason. He was clutching onto a dead spotlight more than his rifle and we couldn't convince him to set it down even though it had zero charge, you couldn't even get a flicker of light from it. Finally we just decided he could take it with him on the way down the driveway. We just wanted to get the hell out of there. We were just about to leave and then we heard the noises from both sides again, and within a few seconds, I saw one of them run across the clearing on the far side of the farm site. That was not good news, it was scary enough that there might be two. Now we'd pretty much confirmed that there were at least three. We made up our minds quickly, and without wasting time, went back to back and started down the driveway while we knew at least one was on the opposite side of the farm and ran the wrong way to intercept us on the driveway. Another was also on the side of the farm we would move away from. So two of our three monsters were at as much disadvantage as possible. We finally took off. We were kind of making a slow escape with Brandon and I facing the main section of woods, and Travis facing the field because we wanted to be the ones facing the most likely attack point since Travis was too scared to handle anything but a dead spotlight, and really couldn't have aimed and shot if he wanted to because he was clutching that dead spotlight like it was his salvation. As we went along, we heard them running kind of alongside us on the larger side of the grove and we were really wondering if trying to escape had been a good idea or not. We were about halfway down the driveway when one of them actually lunged at Brandon and my side. Brandon pretty much instantly fired the 20 gauge in surprise and the critter ran off. I'm sure the critter ran off only because the gun blast surprised it just as much. It was there and gone so fast that we still didn't know what it was exactly. But we were as scared as we'd ever been because the woods were less than 10 feet away on either side of us and those things were fast as hell. After we cleared the grove, we actually didn't hear anything in the corn row next to us, but that doesn't mean much. It's not hard for an animal to move quietly on black dirt between the rows. After a few terrifying minutes, we eventually made it to the vehicle, threw our stuff in and rolled up the windows. We breathed a sigh of relief and tried to figure out what the hell just happened for a good while before starting the engine and heading back to his place. We actually decided to go back the same night after dropping off the dead spotlight-wielding retard at his uncle's place. We took a car instead of the pickup, rolled up the windows and drove up the driveway. I actually saw one of them lunge towards my window quickly and bolt back into the woods once while going up the driveway, roughly the same spot it went after us on foot. That was the last we saw of them with our eyes. It was so fast that I still couldn't tell what it was. I can still replay that moment in my head vividly. Once we got up the driveway, we parked up next to the woods though and rolled down the window a crack so we could hear better. I bet the damned thing was about 6 feet away from my passenger window a few times, but I could never see it in the dim moonlight, but I could sure as hell hear it and so could Brandon. We also tried to flash on the car's lights a couple times just to try to catch one in the open, but we never had the right timing. A day later we brought the truck back up there and camped out in the back. We wanted to kill one of these things and figure out what it was. We thought maybe one of them was out there, but we never really could tell for sure if we were just paranoid and hearing things at that point. We thought we may have heard them, but there was a breeze so it could have just been swaying branches. To this day, I still have no idea what it was. We're in west central Minnesota, and our only ideas of what it could be are some of the mountain lions rumored to be out in the area, or possibly wolves. The reason we thought mountain lions is just because they had such cat-like speed, and supposedly they've been sighted around here before. In the end, I'll never know for sure, but I'd never trade that experience for anything else.